MC Warrior was born in England and educated there and at UBC. MC Warrior worked for over 30 years at the sharp end of production in BC as a logger and commercial fisherman. He has also worked as a union organizer, an environmental campaigner, and a trade union researcher and historian. His new book, Disappearing Minglewood Blues, which I've just read and I can strongly recommend it, it's awesome, contains reflections on his experience working on the coast and the political meaning of work, as well as observations on topics ranging from Buddhism to Ovid in the afterlife. His poetry has been published in numerous magazines and anthologies, as well as in a chapbook, Quitting Time, which was published by MacLeod Books in 1978.
A lot of my writing has grown out of the 35 years, roughly, that I spent logging and fishing on the coast. And like other primary industry jobs in this province, mining, tugs, construction, logging and fishing are a way of life, not just a way of earning a living. And the people who work in those industries tend to have a strong sense of community. They say in fishing, we know each other, often by reputation, if not personally, from one end of the coast to the other, from Ladner to Prince Rupert. So the jobs of this sort tend to have a shared language, which is impenetrable to people outside the trade. But by and large, I won't be providing a glossary tonight. I think that would be tedious, and I hope that the sense of the poems comes through, despite the fact that I often use the language of the trade. The first poem I should like to read is Loch Bay Elegy. It's a poem I wrote after moving to Gabriola, preparing to stop working for wages. And in part, it's about looking for that sense of community again. And in part, it's about my first experiences with logging, as it happens. It's called Loch Bay Elegy. 3 a.m, a hard October gale blowing through the strait, and the tourists, the pleasure boaters, the sporties are all tucked safely in some breakwater's lee, clearing a path for the working water, this coast's arterial blood, log barges, freighters, fish boats and their packers. Standing in the lee of Olabar Point, beside a boomstick washed up on the beach at Loch Bay, I watch navigation lights emerge behind Entrance Island, feel the throbbing of a tug's diesels in the stirrups of my ears as it hauls southeast towards Vancouver Harbour's permanent false horn. A sea lion barks nearby, so close I can almost taste its stench, and once more I am 21, drunk with the smells, the sounds, the sights, and the stories of a world utterly new to me. A world where high lead whistles summon logs the size of small houses up side hills that only a mountain goat would tackle unpaid. A world where wildcat strikes and blacklists, violent death and crippling injury are not just the stuff of folk song, but threads in the weave of everyday life. The running lights begin to dim, the diesels fade. I turn back along the footpath towards home to light a morning fire from wood we felled, bucked, hauled uphill in the wheelbarrow, and split ourselves. Wood from the 5 acres where we fled, hoping that some trace of that vanished world of our youth still lingers here on one of the islands that gave it birth. The next poem I'd like to read is a poem written after my first herring season. I was out there for about 5 or 6 weeks, and I ended up owing the company money, my share of the fuel and grub bill. The same herring cruiser paid on a cruise share basis, and out of any earnings you do have, you have to pay for your share of the fuel and grub. And we didn't make enough money to pay all that bill. Herring is a very stressful fishery, Openings and closures are on short notice. They're very skittish fish. So there is a real sense of panic around everything that takes place concerning an opening. I should also note that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans makes its opening and closure announcements over the radio, and from patrol vessels with names like Atlin Post, Babine Post, and Comox Post. The poem is called The 1982 Roe Herring Seine Fishery, Northern Area, 1. Attention, the Roe Herring Seine Fleet. This is the Fisheries Patrol Vessel Fence Post. An announcement concerning a possible opening in Kitkatla will be made in 1/2 hour. 100,000 horses steam east. Attention, the Roe Herring Seine Fleet. This is the Fisheries Patrol Vessel Compost. An announcement concerning a possible opening in Striker Bay will be made in 1/2 hour. 100,000 horses steam south. Attention, the Roe Herring Seine Fleet. This is the Fisheries Patrol Vessel Last Post. An announcement concerning an opening in Kumshua Inlet will be made in 5 minutes. 100,000 horses wheel, then plunge northwest, darkening the sky and churning Hecate Strait to froth. 200 motorized vessels of wrath, seeking to vent on hapless fish their long months' frustration. Meanwhile, beneath Kumshua's sheltered waters, the herring school seeking a private place where among the kelps they may embrace. But on the surface, in the air, armed with sounders, sonars, and Cessnas, a raucous host of electronic voyeurs lurks, hoping to cause a massive coitus interruptus. A horde waiting for the sentence, which spills a battalion of skiffmen from bunks and galley tables, a barrage of nets from 100 sterns. Kumshua Inlet is now open to purse-seine roe herring fishing. Klaxons shatter eardrums, searchlights probe each pore of the shoreline, and deer flee panic-stricken from screams of "Stand by!" as 100 diesels begin to whine like Stukas hungry for cities. 3. Against us, who can prevail? From so many millions of dollars worth of steel and technology, who can hide? Yet come daybreak, the shore is white with spawn, and in Vancouver, our creditors are white with shock. The roe herring Seine Fleet has skunked again. Now I'd like to read 3 poems that are somewhat topical. They were actually all written some time ago, but if history is a big circle, well, the circle is coming back around to when these poems were written. Well, they weren't all written at the same time. It's bigger and smaller circles, I guess. The first one is it's a poem about people who are suddenly being called essential workers, who only a few years ago were being told by the Liberal government that they were fungible, anybody could do their job, they would be way overpaid, and we're going to cut your wages. People like hospital cleaners and janitors, generally people who do work that it's easy for those who are at the top of the food chain to think of as being unnecessary or certainly overpaid. Anyway, the poem is called Cleaning Up History. I am raising a subscription to erect a statue to the unknown janitor, to the slave scrubbing blood from the Republic's marbled walls, while Marcus Antonius praises his good friend Caesar. It will be a monument to the rest of us, to those who must follow armed with mops and buckets after the great men of history have tracked their muddy boots across the kitchen floors of our lives. No expense will be spared. This memorial will be stronger than the tantrums of heroes, more durable than the spite of kings. Not even the most sycophantic of scholars will be able to ignore It's concrete proof that history itself requires a regular spring cleaning. And this next poem was written 3 years ago, at a time when Vancouver Island was blanketed in smoke from fires in the interior of British Columbia. And now we're getting it from California, Oregon, and Washington. It's called Fire Season. Towards dawn, the starless night, moonlit by a veiled invisible moon, starts fading to a pale milky gray, turns into a sinister canopy punctuated by a baleful copper orb that looms like Pharaoh's mace over a morning without bees or birdsong, over a land that feels as though suspended in limbo while awaiting Armageddon, over desiccated maples caught unawares by this opaque evidence of relatives 300 miles distant being burned alive. The catch in my throat is neither fear nor pity, just smoke drifting down from a caribou ablaze. And this poem is about how that I feel anyway it is when one isn't really somebody who's powerful or particularly talented at standing up to the boss or other situations of that sort, what it feels like when you're put into the sort of position that Luther perhaps felt when he nailed his 95 Theses to that cathedral door. The poem is called Luther. The some simply feel no fear, for whom peril and strife are a drug, addictive. For the rest of us, courage is a dread feeling of choices exhausted, of standing here trembling because we can do no other. And now for a straightforward logging poem. It's a poem I wrote after I thought I was finished for the season. I'd been laid off. I was going to collect pogie until the spring, but just to cover my arse, I went around to the loggers agencies downtown and suddenly found myself working on Vancouver Island, on the west coast of Vancouver Island, just a little ways from Port Alberni at Macmillan Bladell Limited, Franklin River Division. After a certain point, all rational thought ceases. There is only the hope that at 1 in the afternoon, this whistle, barely audible in the distance, is the first blast of the ho, 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 ho of slack off. The world is revealed in, shrinks to a few square yards of white misery. Stumbling, sweating, slipping after the chokers, huddling in the lee of upended roots between turns, numbed fingers lurching over the buttons which ought to be blowing whistles back to the shrouded yarder, feet wrinkled like old newspaper by sleet enfilading this forsaken mountaintop where only my throat is parched. I notice a small icicle clinging to a broken seedling. Surely a mirage here in this white desert. Still, I bend to drink it, delicate maneuver of lips, teeth, and tongue. The sense of loss is crushing, tastes like salt. Now, I'd like to read 3 short poems, 2 sort of haiku-like. First is called February. Late snow cloaks the gnarled plum's green shoots, yet blackbirds still practice their spring songs. And the next one was prompted by going to an art gallery in Victoria and seeing a print by Hasui Kawase of a scene in the Japanese countryside in the fall. It was a river with maple trees turning on either side of it. It's called Autumn in Orase. Like bold dolphins, black boulders leap towards the dying fires of the maples. and now one that's a bit longer, and it's about being called in to work on mill cleanup when I wasn't expecting to be. So I perhaps stayed up a little later than I should have, having got off on Friday from the afternoon shift. It's called Overtime. 24 hours without sleep on mill cleanup. Another murky dawn inching its way over the tangled skins, bleeding oil and sap beneath the reject chain. For this poem, you should imagine yourself to be in the wheelhouse of a sailboat at night, traveling up the west coast to go fishing sockeye at the Blue Line, which is basically sort of just a little bit north of Port Renfrew. It's August. Night watch. White foam on a black swell, a new moon and Jordan River astern. Nothing but ghosts on the radar. Carefully, cat-like, I bite the nape of your neck, the arch of your throat, then stroll out onto the Dodger to check the running lights again, and time Sheringham as it winks lasciviously at the American shore. I suppose I should point out Sheringham is a lighthouse, and he wrote. Another fishing poem, Last Year in Nitnit. It's a poem about fishing on the west coast again, but a little bit further north of Port Renfrew in October, November, and the weather tends to be what we call sloppy, a whole lot. Last Year in Nitnit, half moon, half tide, half five, and half a gale blowing as I squeeze past the drum for my dawn piss off the stern. Somewhere to starboard, the last of the night is being broken upon an anchor chain, clanking as it's winched up through the fair lead. The chief's already up and leaning over the rail, one hand at his fly, the radar's humming, the running lights faintly gleaming. Time to start the toast and coffee and stand by to lift our own pick. Winds northwest 15 to 20 knots, shifting to southeast 50 by midday. My feet won't budge. Perhaps they already sense this forecast beginning its surge up through the keel and doubt their stomach. Perhaps they're just weary, exhausted after 8 days of rolling in the trough. Perhaps, despairing of escape, they've surrendered to the murmuring dulse and eelgrass, have decided that they, like flotsam, will slip quietly away with the night, to drift out on the ebb, out past the barnacles, mussels, and chunks of old rope moored here beside the world's edge, out past foghorns and lighthouses, out past the last weather ship, to wait until absorbed, molecule by molecule, into the vast immensity of the Western Ocean. And the last poem I should like to read is the title poem of my book. The title is taken from a Grateful Dead song on their first LP in 1967, New Minglewood Blues. And the poem itself is, I suppose, something of a reflection upon my life, a summation of it all. It's called Disappearing Minglewood Blues. I was born in a death cell, reared in a fox's den, earned my living forging skyhooks, selling chokeholds to the green men. I always greet Aurora sitting on a lotus chair, and when I visit Semele, we go swirling through museum squares. If I hung up my hard hat, you'd scarcely notice that I'd been here. Thank you.
Nothing but ghosts in the radar. I don't know whether to take, I don't know what that means. And I'm more than curious. What are ghosts in radar? Honest.
It's just little blips that aren't actually boats. So you'll get these little things that just sort of show up and disappear, rather than a boat which will go, so there'll be a blip that keeps coming either at you or behind you. These are just things that come and go. So the idea is that there's really nothing around you, nothing but the sharing of light.
Thank you.
Sometimes I find reading your poems, they seem so immediate and visceral. And I think some people in the chat box have mentioned that as well, like Nefertiti. And I know these span a long stage of your working life, like from the 70s and through to today. Are you, when you were working in the forest or fishing, did you have a notebook with you? Are these immediate? Are you writing them down? Does something come to you? What's your writing process? I guess I'm asking.
Well, generally, I'm not very prolific. But the other thing is, really, if you had the energy to write anything at the end of the day logging, obviously you weren't working hard enough. People talk about stuff. Everybody would get together after work. If you got out of camp, people would go to the pub before they went home, and you sit around, you talk about things, and stuff comes to you from doing that, right? And I also lived in Kelsey Bay, places like that, where the whole community. So you're constantly getting ideas and reminders about the kinds of things you can write about. Plus, it just sticks in your mind. I can still smell what it's like to be on a sailing boat, and I can picture it really well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing I really enjoyed with your poems is the language that's so specific to, well, logging, for example, where you actually have footnotes. So you're trying, you need to some extent to explain to us what some of these terms are if we've never been in that experience ourselves. But it provides a kind of richness or a new dimension to the poems as well. So I really like that. Do we have some other questions here? Maybe a couple more. Oh, Francie has a question. Awesome, Francie.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that I turned the laptop, so that your union brother, Joe, my partner here, could see you. And he's not often drawn to poetry, so congratulations, Mark.
Oh,
and thank you. I enjoyed hearing these. And I've been following your career in the Union magazine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm a proud laborer. Although it was at the tail end of my my working life, I worked for the Laborers Union, and I'm proud of it. Yes.
It's a bit of a silly question, perhaps, but hey, there are no silly questions, right? We're all amongst friends. Did you hone your poetry reading voice intentionally, or is it just gritty like that as a result of the life that you've certainly lived? That's a compliment, by the way.
No. No, thank you very much. I just, I think it's the smoke around here or something, and my voice is feeling very gravelly all of a sudden. Yes.
There is a lot of smoke in the air. We're all feeling a little gritty right now, but I think maybe Francie's also, I don't know, I'm speaking for you, Francie, but maybe there's that grittiness in the language as well, right? The
I see.
Vocabulary
Yes.
that's used.
Oh yeah, no, that's the nature of that kind of you're very close to nature. You're very close to the sea. You're very close to the earth. Even if you're got a big log chewing it up as it goes into the landing, you're very close to everything. It does tend to give you a very, and let's face it, a lot of people. I didn't read it, but I have a poem about a fellow I knew somewhat well who I thought he was dead. As it turned out, he managed to get up and walk to the landing. A fellow called Mike Freilinger, and I've been quite lucky. I not actually been present for anybody getting killed on the job, but I have seen people injured, and some of them very severely. So those kinds of things do also affect how you see the world. Not to mention nearly getting killed yourself. It tends to wake you up quite a bit.
Logging in particular, a very, very dangerous occupation historically, and I guess even to the present day, actually.
Actually, it's much safer now.
Is it?
It's quite interesting that I think it's because of the IWA steelworkers, because you go to the United States, it's the most dangerous job in the United States by a long shot, whereas here, construction is more dangerous than logging,
Okay.
I believe, per capita these days. So it's a matter of, do you want to make it safe or not? And I think that unions have had a tremendous amount to do with making logging much safer than it used to be.
I'm a big supporter of the unions, being a union member myself. We were talking before the reading started, in fact, about how it was more dangerous though in the 30s, right? That there were quite a few deaths, and I don't know much, but you've written a book about the history of labor in the province, is that right?
No, it's the history of the laborers' union.
The laborers' union, right?
Yeah, it's but actually, I think I do and sort of point out some stuff about safety. When I was logging, and it was safer when I was logging than it was in the 30s. We'd have 30 to 40 killed a year, and you know that was that was just standard. Now it's 3 or 4.
Nefertiti has written that you have a dangerous sounding voice. I just thought I would point that out to you. Are there any last, sorry?
You know?
We just had a question about where to get your book and if it's possible to get a signed copy.
Oh, well, they can be got from Mother Earth Publishers, Mona Fertig. But if you wanted a signed copy, I actually have some, and I can ship them to you if you wish, if that's okay, Mona.
Mona has her thumbs up. That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, if mcwar@shaw.ca if you wish.